What's going on, everybody? We are back. We have episode 118 of the Club and Sub podcast. Last week was labeled 118. However, I was wrong. It was actually 117. So that will be edited. This week is 118. Last show of the year. We're talking Jared Cannonier, Sean Strickland. I believe it's UFC Vegas 67. It'll be a fun card. No, what is it?
66.
No, we had 66 last fight night.
You sure?
I could be wrong. DM
No,
me if I'm
because
wrong.
it was Orlando last time.
Fuck, you're right.
Come on,
okay.
John. 2 weeks in a row, bro. Get your shit together. I'm just kidding.
God damn it! It's really confusing. It was a much simpler world when it was like UFC Fight Night 100 or 150. You know, now it's having to navigate Vegas and new locations, and apparently there's going to be even more next year. Anyway, though, yeah, I mean, it's a good card. I'm excited to get into it. You know, as usual, we're brought to you guys at betonline.ag. And if you want a 50% bonus up to your first $1,000 deposit, use the promo code CLUBSUB. You got the whole crew tonight. You got me, John, at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags, and Luke at SWR_betting. You know, I said it to you guys before we came on. I'm still not mentally over the Jared Gordon fight from last weekend yet. It left a very, very sour taste in my mouth. I am kind of excited to get a month off after this. I'm going to be doing a lot of tape for it, but that was tilting. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty good card on paper, and I'm excited to talk about it. I don't have many bets, but I'm excited for the fights. Luke, what do you think?
I think it's a great way to round out the year, to be honest. I think this is a firefight card, a ton of fun fights. Like, I mean, you know, it's a good card when you got the battle of the Saids on the prelims. Like, you know, I don't think that fight should be on the prelims personally, but still, you know, it's a good card when you got one of those type of fights on the prelims.
Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to Luke's point, yeah, solid, fun fights. But again, to your point as well, I don't have a ton of bets for this card either. So it'll be interesting to talk about the fights as well.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so with that out of the way, let's jump into it. First fight of the night. We had a decent one here. Sergey Morozov taking on Journey Newson. I taped it late, and I do think Morozov's the side, though it's kind of hard to justify minus 300. But I mean, it was so easy for Ricardo Ramos to get Newson down. I kind of think it's going to be equally easy for Morozov to get him down. Don't really think he should have too many issues controlling him, and I think even on the feet here, I personally favor Morozov a decent bit. I guess some concerns about Morozov potentially being chinny, but I don't know. Paiva and Douglas de Andrade hit a lot harder than Journey Newson does, so I'm not going to really put too much stock into that. He should be fine. I expect it's just going to be a mat return clinic. No play for me, though. What do you think, Lex?
Yeah, agreed. Like, I think Newson in general is just like an average UFC level fighter, decent power, nothing special, low volume. I think this should be an easy fight for Morozov to utilize his grappling.
Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I've always kind of been a Morozov guy overall. But yeah, him getting chin checked a few times just makes, because I think he's a good striker, but he's a guy, if you really watch him closely on the feet, I do think he just gets lazy at points, and I think that's a big part of his issue. But to your guys' points, I mean, I think this is a pretty good fight for him. The issue I'm having, though, is like with Newson, and what makes the fight a little bit difficult to handicap is that I still don't like really know who Journey Newson is. Like, it's still kind of hard to. The fights have kind of been all over the board. You know, you had the quick one against Costa. You know, kind of just danced around against a Fernie. You know, Ramos kind of took him down 3 times on 3 attempts. And that's another part of it is like, we've only seen him face 3 takedown attempts. He's been taken on all 3 times. So that's obviously not great, but it's still not like a large sample size. Newson is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I just, to me, there's like not enough out there for Newson for me to like feel great about laying this on Morozov. But I mean, from what I assume, you know, I think he probably has him covered in both categories, but maybe it is a good spot to just lay the wood on him. I mean, I laid a pretty heavy price in the Douglas Andrade fight, so I probably should go back to the window again, but I don't know. It's more for me. Like, I don't like laying super chalky prices into guys that I still don't know a ton about because I'm still making some heavy assumptions at a big price tag. So, but yeah, it should be a good spot for Morozov. Probably best way to play him, buy down, play him by points. Probably just grinds him out.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on. Good fight here. We have David Dvorak taking on Manel Kopp. Lags, what do you think?
I have minimal interest here, but I do have some interest in a Dvorak decision only prop when that does come out, just because I do think that overall Dvorak's the minute winner here and Kopp's more of the moment winner. Like, I respect the power, the finishing upside, the athleticism, no doubt about it. But like, if he doesn't finish Dvorak, I just think across 15 minutes here, I think it's a very competitive fight. So, and add on top of that, I don't think the over 2.5 is minus 150, yet Kopp is almost minus 300. I don't think that makes a ton of sense, quite frankly. So yeah, I'm just interested in the Dvorak decision only when that comes out. So,
Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a dog or pass spot on Dvorak. I think Lag summed it up pretty well. Kopp's always pretty much been the same guy. We know he's a sound athlete, good southpaw, fast, nice hook game, mobile, but he's just a guy that doesn't historically step on the gas enough. I know we saw him, knock out Ismagulov in the last outing, but even if you go back and watch that, that's probably like the most aggressive that we'd ever seen Ismagulov outside of the most recent fight with Johnson. So I think it was actually more of a product that like Ismagulov like forced him to fight him, where he was like, all right, you're going to come at me. And then, that's kind of when he opened up a little bit more, but historically that's always been his problem. He's going to go out there and kind of look to counter fight and look to have prettier fights and look to find his shot. Like, even if you go back to the Pantoja fight, like I always talked about it with Charles Johnson the other week. We do have Bobby Greenback on this card, but he's clearly losing the fight to Pantoja, and the guy's sitting there doing like the Ali shuffle and like shoulder rolling and stuff. It's like, what are you doing, you fucking moron? You're getting outstruck right now. Like what are you doing? But like I said, I think the guy hits hard. He is probably one of the biggest hitters at 125. So he just kind of always has that option. But I mean, if this fight hits the scorecards, I don't really know how anybody's opinion can be other than this fight's a competitive fight. I mean, David Dvorak was evens with Nicolau right prior to that, at least market sentiment wide. Obviously he got hurt in that fight. I think that's kind of playing in people's minds. So it's just going to be kind of one of those spots where it's like, I mean, if you like Kopp, I said it the other week with Nicolau against Schnell, instead of laying, a super chalky price, just play him by knockout, play him inside the distance, because that's how he's going to cover this type of price tag in the overwhelming majority of his fights. So, yeah, this is a complete dog or pass situation where there might be some overcorrection, and I think Dvorak might have some value.
I largely agree. I'm going to bet Dvorak in all likelihood. I do have concerns regarding Kopp's athleticism because, if we're being honest, he is probably the most athletic fighter at that division. Very fast, obviously explosive and powerful. And I was a bit concerned with Dvorak getting hurt multiple times like he did against Nicolau in his last fight. I do think that's a concern that just has to be, given a lot of credence with respect to this fight. But I also, on the other side of that, wonder if I maybe understate Nicolau's general power. I mean, the guy did drop Louis Smolka 3 times. He obviously knocked out Matt Schnell a week ago or 2 weeks ago. It's possible he's just a bigger hitter than I've given him credit for throughout his career. But yeah, I mean, I largely agree with you guys. If they go the distance, it's probably close to a 50-50 fight. It's one of those fights where even Kopp's power edge, he's so reliable to land so little that it might not even really offset what's going on in the fight. The big question is just how much bigger is the edge in finishing equity for Kopp here? Because I do think it's fairly sizable. But ultimately, I mean, is it really more than 25%? It's not as if Dvorak has a history of being chinny. The guy went out there and beat Bruno Silva, who's a fairly dangerous fighter himself, and looked just fine. Getting the Cop 70% just doesn't make a lot of sense, though, given his lack of minute winning tools. Whereas, obviously, I'm not saying Dvorak's the most high output fighter in the world, but I do think exchanges should be very close for the majority of the fight. So I do think there's a bit of value on the Dvorak side. I'm not super passionate, but I think at plus 200, you kind of have to take a poke here. So, I mean, I'll be poking it. We'll see what happens.
One last thing too,
Yeah.
John. Do you guys think that Dvorak has any wrestling upside in this fight?
Yeah, I more think him getting the initial takedown will not be easy, but I still think if Kopp gets put shoulders on the mat, he's got issues. You saw it, Nikolau's first takedown, he really struggled to get up from that. The next few times Nicolau tried to get in on him, he did a pretty good job scrambling, but I still don't really trust Kopp on his back when he's flattened out. And I mean, you go back to his regional footage, and there's obviously a lot of tape of him looking quite poor in those positions. I mean, what do you think, Legs?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Not much to add.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think if anybody's got the grappling upside in this fight, it's Kopp or it's Dvorak, right?
Yeah, it's Dvorak, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up because it's not something I've kind of really heard many people talk about. Like, I think Kopp has a really good sprawl, but to your point, I mean, I can't, unsee why Kopp's lost some fights in the past. He lost the Lucas Sasaki fight based on wrestling. He got submitted by Horiguchi. We obviously saw him drop the first round against Nicolau. And obviously Dvorak hasn't wrestled much within the UFC, but if you do a deeper dive into him, he's wrestled more regionally and has a competent submission game. So I'm not saying it's like high percentage for him to go out there and out wrestle Kopp or submit him. I'm just saying it could be actually a sneaky path, especially if you factor in if he doesn't get knocked out, like you're getting competitive striking rounds, he lands a takedown, that could be
in an otherwise close fight.
Something to consider.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable take, to be honest. And yeah, I agree. So we'll see. Let's go to Dvorak. Moving on, we have an interesting fight here, though. And I'm very curious to get both of your opinions on it. I wouldn't say I have the strongest opinion, but I do think I kind of have a contrarian opinion here. We have Brian Battle taking on Renat Fakhretdinov. I think Fakhretdinov's at about minus 150 right now, if I'm not mistaken. That's correct. Luke, what do you think here?
Yeah, so I've been the biggest Brian Battle truther out there. I've been, championing this guy from day one. As a result, I've cashed on him in all 3 of his UFC fights so far. This is kind of a weird spot, though, for me, because it's honestly, I've never been the biggest narrative guy, but honestly, I think there's a lot of narrative that does need to be talked about here. He's taking this fight on 3 weeks' notice, and it's only his second fight down at 170, and he made 170 in his debut, but I mean, he did not look good on the scales at all, like very, very frail. And that was when he had a full camp. So to me, he's like a guy that really needs like a sound, 8 weeks minimum to like make a solid cut down to 70. So I'm honestly skeptical if Brian Battle even makes weight this week. I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle for him. And once again, a little bit of more narrative, but like the spot just kind of strikes me similar to kind of what happened with Lupita Godinez at points, where it's like she came in, she's all fired up. She's doing well. The promotion loves her. And she's like, I'm just going to be a company woman. I'm going to take these short notice fights or whatever. And it's like, she's dropped a couple of those, right? Like, because she just wants to get in there, cash a check. And I just get some really weird vibes in this spot for Brian Battle here. And like I said, I think the weight cut's actually a really serious concern. But taking that and actually playing it into more of a like fight analysis standpoint, if you look at Brian Battle in a lot of ways in guys that have came out and wrestled him, a lot of guys have had early wrestling success on him and have taken rounds off of him in the past. It's just been that Battle's always been a guy to eventually work back up to his feet, have the better cardio, go out there and, outwork guys, outlast guys, and either finish them or just outpoint them. And with this spot, I don't know if you're going to be getting that same type of thing from Brian Battle. And one thing that's pretty consistent with Fakhretdinov is he's going to go out there and chuck his hands and he's going to shoot a ton of takedowns and he's going to go out there and look to grind. So I actually came away on the side of saying I do think Fakhretdinov actually comes out here and grinds him in this spot. But if you told me that Brian Battle was getting a full camp and you were giving me even money, I'd actually probably take a shot on Brian Battle. But to me, this is just a spot type of fight where I don't like the spot for Battle.
Yeah, so I would bet Battle at this line similarly if it was a full camp. I have very similar feeling to you. It is tough on 2 weeks' notice, especially against a guy who's going to do nothing but wrestle. I'm more worried about it from a cardio standpoint than he needs to game plan for Renat Fakhretdinov. I bet Michailidis in Fakhretdinov's last fight, and my view on Fakhretdinov's wrestling hasn't really changed at all. In fact, I remember my prior when I taped this fight, and I went back to check, did he change it up? Were the takedowns different than what I expected them to be? And they really weren't. It's the same stuff that bothered me coming into the UFC. He doesn't really put shots in front of his shots, not effectively anyway. He tends to bend at the hip rather than change levels. He doesn't really have a chain wrestling base. He did. I just expected Michailidis to have more resistance to it, if I'm being honest. He did the same kind of just get in there on a single shots, grab a double, and slam him down. And I saw the same holes that I always see, which is I really believe maybe Fakhretdinov will end up being one of these fighters who, for whatever reason, his game looks like it shouldn't work, and it does. But Andreas Michailidis is not enough to make me believe that. And I see how far this guy shoots and how high up he is when he changes levels. I really think guys with decent takedown defense are not going to have a hard time keeping fights on the feet with Fakhretdinov. And, I expect he'll get takedowns against Battle, but I actually think, the guy doesn't put hooks in, and Battle is not someone who accepts position on the mat. So I think he's going to have a hard time keeping him down there. And the one thing I'll say about Battle is he does strike a lot out of the clinch. If you're not on top of him, he tends to do a lot of damage there. You go back and watch the Andre Petrosky fight, and what really ended up taking it out of Petrosky was how badly he was getting butchered in the clinch when he was looking for takedowns. And so I kind of think it's a messy fight in that Fakhretdinov probably needs to wear him out here, but I'm not even sure he has the better cardio. I'm just kind of skeptical of Battle on short notice. I don't think he consolidates position on top very likely here. I think while they're on the feet, Battle's hittable, but we've talked about Brian Battle on the show a few times. The guy's very, very durable. He's very big for the division. Fakhretdinov is probably more hittable than Battle is, if we're being honest, standing. So he has a path via grinding here, and I have the same concerns that Luke has. I think what I'm thinking about is potentially playing the over. But I feel fairly strongly that Fakhretdinov's not going to finish Battle. I really would be very, very surprised at that, unless Battle's durability is just completely fucked for this fight. I don't think there's much danger of Fakhretdinov submitting him. I think a KO is fairly unlikely. I actually think most of the KO or the finish equity is likely tied to Battle submission and Fakhretdinov putting his head into something here. But I'm leaning towards the over. If Battle blew out to plus 150, plus 185, I think I'd get involved on his side. But I'm still not a believer in Fakhretdinov. Flags, what do you think?
I guess I'm rounding out the trio here. If Battle, the cardio obviously is a huge talking point in this fight. But to your point, John, I don't think Bernat's really that great of a wrestler. He's super aggro with it, but you talked about it. The shots are not great. Setting up for the shots not great. I think Battle could stuff a majority of the shots, and on the feet, I think this is Battle all day, quite frankly. But yeah, I think the cardio and the weight cut is a huge talking point for this fight for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on, we got Mahashate coming off of taking my money against Steve Garcia, taking on another Garcia. We got Rafa Garcia stepping in here, another man who has a history of taking my money. So it's an interesting fight. I have not read these guys the best throughout their careers thus far. And I don't really know how to feel about this. There's a part of me that says, you bet Steve Garcia because you thought he could grapple Mahashate. You should probably bet Rafa. Except while Steve Garcia is hittable on the feet, he is also willing to deal damage on the feet. He hits pretty hard and goes forward, whereas I don't think Rafa presents many issues standing in this fight whatsoever. I do think Rafa just grounding him out here, getting on top and handling him is in play. And I am considering betting him, but I can't I can't shake this feeling. I went back and looked at Mahashate's the one regional fight available where he gets grinded out on the mat, and he clearly just doesn't have a clue. But then rewatching his contenders fight, you can kind of tell that he's made substantial improvements to his defensive grappling. Now, whether he has made those improvements flat on his back, I'm not really sure. It's hard to kind of just project that he has, but he's a big guy and he's only 22. I think it's fair to expect like a fair amount of improvements there. And my big fear with this fight is, well, I feel very comfortable saying Mahashate is the better striker here and the more dangerous striker. I feel very comfortable saying he has better cardio in this fight. So for this line to be value, I have to know that Rafa can get on top of him and hold him down with ease. And while I do think Rafa is a better wrestler and stronger than Steve Garcia is, I don't think Rafa's like an elite grappler by any means. So if he just works up here and lights him up, I won't be surprised. So I'm ultimately probably going to pass it. I don't know. It feels like a spot where I should bet Rafa just based on strength of competition. He's demonstrated ability to grapple better guys than Mahashate, but I don't know. I get bad vibes from it. And Mahashate is huge and seems like a sick athlete. So I don't know. What do you think, Lags?
I was going to add, and the fact that you bet Steve Garcia. And so,
yeah, well, that's but I was clearly, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you touched on with the regional scene with him getting absolutely mauled on the ground, and that's kind of the last data point we have of his defensive grappling. So it's kind of tough to talk about at that point. But talking about Garcia's grappling, he's not a great control wrestler. He's more of like a mat return kind of guy, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, I could see Mahashate just working up, lighting him up on the feet. They're both hittable on the feet. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a mess of a fight, quite frankly.
Luke, what do you think?
It's another fight that I think you can make really viable arguments either way, and I think you're just dealing with a dickload of variance based on assumption into like multiple different categories. So yeah, I've seen a lot of strong opinions on both sides. I more so come down on the Garcia side because, to your point too, John, I haven't seen this guy be able to get up from bottom, and the only time he's been grappled, he looked like he was completely fucking lost. But to your point, that fight was back in 2019. He's 22, 23 years old now. It's like, and he's big. And to your point, also, I don't want to parrot everything you're saying, but like from the Contender Series, like he looks like a pretty athletic, flowy type of striker who seems actually pretty matured. It's just, I have no idea if he's going to be able to stuff the wrestling attack of Garcia or not. And it's like, if he can't, and which is what makes this very enticing to bet Garcia. Garcia is going to look like minus 300 in this fight. Like he really is. But if he has improved, whether that's the takedown defense or defensive grappling and stand-up game or whatever, he's going to start flowing on a guy like Rafa Garcia, and I think Rafa Garcia is going to have a lot of troubles. We also talk about the gas tank of Rafa Garcia as well. You're going to get a good, solid, probably 7.5 minutes from him. Then he's going to kind of autopilot the last 2.5, and then third he's going to do is most likely his damnedest to just concede and hang on a little bit. But what I will say is, he did win the third round against Levy, right? Like he still pushed through in that fight, took the second off of close. Mahashate is just a guy.
Levy's a bit of a gas bag himself, though, to be fair.
That's very true, but I mean, how does Mahashate deal? How is his gassing against a wrestling heavy attack?
And Rafa's tough. I will say that he is a tough guy. You can tell that.
Yeah. So it's another fight. I can understand bets on both sides, to be honest, and as a result, lying the fight around close to evens. I know Rafa's taken some more money. I came very close to betting him when it was at pick, and then it got bet, and then I'm just like, I kind of wanted like plus 100, and it would have been like a 1 unit Rafa Garcia play, but yeah, I mean, I'm good. I'm good. I'm not a real gambler.
I guess
fuck this, dude.
I guess there is an argument that could stem from, look, a lot, as you mentioned, Luke, a lot of this fight is just huge degrees of variance, but it's more likely like Rafa could theoretically knock Mahashate out. He's been hurt before. We have seen him show very little defense before. So Rafa probably more live standing than Mahashate is if Garcia can get on top of him and hold him there, I guess is an argument. But I'm with you. It's just hard for me to. It's one of these fights where if we're wrong and I bet it against a 22-year-old who we know has definitely made improvements, and he just stands up off the first takedown, I'm just going to be like, "Fuck me! Like, what am I doing?" You know. So I don't know. Moving on, we have this is arguably the best fight of the night. We got Said Nurmagomedov taking on Saidyokub, Kakhramonov, Lags. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, great fight. Like you touched on, one of the best fights of the night. And I have a small bet here on Saidyokub, actually, at -110. I think standing, I think it's ultimately fairly close. I think you give slight edge to Nurmagomedov, but in terms of the grappling upside and the cardio, I think they're both favor Saidyokub here. I think you can time the multitude spinning attacks of Nurmagomedov. I think he just goes to the well too often with that. And we've seen him grounded time and time again. So I think a small play on Saidyokub's fine.
Luke, what about you?
I lean to the Saidyokub side as well, but I mean, no play for me. It's another just really tricky fight on the card. I think Said. This is gonna, I guess, how you want to classify their names. Nurmagomedov has, those.
You say Nurmi.
We call him Nurmi, I guess. Well, that works. Has just those kind of crafty Russian coast, range-based elements where he's largely pretty difficult to look good against on the feet. I think that Saidyokub brings a level of pressure, but I don't know, or I should say I know he's our boy, but I don't know from a technical standpoint if the fight's even really that close on the feet, to be honest with you. I think there's a power edge for Saidyokub, but I think technically, I think Nurmagomedov is a much better striker. But to Lags' point as well, we've seen him get taken down before, but it's not like easy. I mean, like even Barcelos really struggled to flatten him. Especially in the second round. And it was really like the third round where he was kind of able to get to his back and in transition and whatnot. But I mean, historically, he's not an easy guy to out wrestle, but I do think the wrestling upside does lie from Saidyokub. So really the fight to me comes down to, because I do think that Nurmagomedov, we have seen him get tired later in fights. So I think if Saidyokub can weaponize kind of his pace in cardio, stay on him, and not give Nurmagomedov a pretty type of fight, I think he can definitely win this fight. But it's another fight that I just have a lot of questions about in terms of like the style dynamic here, because it was Umar that who played in a similar style, at least back in the day, that did give Saidyokub some troubles. Granted, I would say Saidyokub probably fought Umar more competitively than most guys have, and that fight was, when both guys were 22. So, yeah, it's just a really interesting fight. I lean Saidyokub, but I think lining the fight competitively makes sense.
I am on the other side here. I'm gonna bet Nurmagomedov. I personally think you're just talking about a huge gap in experience and the level of competition these guys have fought. Yes, Saidyokub did fight Umar, and he fought reasonably competitive in that fight, but obviously it was a couple years ago. I mean, Nurmagomedov's fought some of the most talented guys in this division, if we're being honest. Debuted against Justin Scoggins, who, while Justin Scoggins' career didn't turn out to be what people thought it would be, certainly not an easy debut fight. Beat him. Blew through Ricardo Ramos. The Barcelos fight, he outlanded Barcelos nearly, I think, almost 2-1 at distance, if I'm not mistaken, in that fight. That was a very, very tight fight. And to me, that's kind of part of the crux of my argument here is I think it's very hard at this stage of Saidyokub's career. I like him as a prospect quite a bit, but I think it's hard to project him to be better or at the level of Barcelos when he fought Said Nurmagomedov. Like, don't get me wrong, Saidyokub's look good, but it's like Trevin Jones and then Ronnie Lawrence. And I love Ronnie, but Ronnie's the kind of guy where if you're just a better grappler, he's screwed. He doesn't have anywhere else to fall back on in that kind of a fight, and that was the case there. And then you have, I mean, look, he blew through Cody Salmon. He beat Douglas De Silva at Andrade, who is probably still a top 20 to 25 guy at bantamweight, if we're being honest. I'm with you, Luke, in that I don't think the striking is very close. Nurmagomedov's a very, very tough guy to get inside on. I mean, if he can get inside consistently, like that's great, and he'll probably do well. But the way he was able to just shut down Barcelos on the outside makes me think it's going to be very, very tough for Saidyokub to do that. And similarly to what you said, Luke, it's like Barcelos eventually did get on top of him and get some control late in that fight, but Said's not an easy guy to hold down, and he's not an easy guy to take down. And with that being the case, I don't know. I think I'm getting the better striker who is a quality defensive grappler and has just much more tested than his opponent here at near evens. And to me, you know, that doesn't really make a ton of sense. I'm someone who has faded Nurmagomedov unsuccessfully in the past. And I've kind of come around on him being like, I don't know if he has the process to win a title or be top 10, but he is a very, very good fighter. And I think this is just a very big step up for Saidyokub at this point. I just can't reasonably line this at minus 110. I think minus 150 to 85 is a bit more fair personally. Moving on, though, we go from maybe the best fight of the night to a absolutely hilarious fight. We have Julian, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Marquez taking on Deron Winn. Luke, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's a shit show. That's for sure. I'm kind of the opinion that Julian knocks him out, but I still can't really unsee the Pitolo fight for Marquez, which is something that Winn's going to try to, go out there and do. And if we're calling a spade, Marquez was going to lose that fight like he was, and that's what Winn's going to try to do. But I still think 5'6" Deron Winn, man. Like I can't get over it. His striking is just not very good. I mean, he's gonna throw his hands for sure, but like I just think the physicality difference between these two is much wider. I think you have submission upside for Marquez, knockout upside for Marquez, physicality advantages for Marquez. But it's probably a fight I would assume that he's probably gonna struggle early in again. Which is why I'm not really running to the window to lay any moderate chalk on him. But we've seen him get tired, but we've also seen him just like outlast in multiple fights where we've seen Deron Winn just completely death gas, multiple times too. So I think you're going to see more in the tank for Marquez, and he's going to send Mr. Deron Winn packing. But yeah, I mean, gun to my head, I'd rather like take Marquez inside the distance than lay anything crazy.
I really wanted to bet Marquez pre-tape here. To your point, Luke, I'm kind of the same way. Like I had some hope for Deron Winn when he first came into the UFC, and most of that hope's been extinguished, if I'm being honest. And then I taped it, and I had two immediate thoughts. The first one being, oh my God, Julia Marquez is terrible. The second one being, how the fuck did I bet this guy against RoboCop? What? Yeah, I mean, I feel the thing is, I think in this fight, Deron Winn has the best single skill on either side in this fight with his wrestling. The problem is he's too small. I honestly think his inability to control guys on the mat is because of how small his limbs are. He's just too small. And on top of which, if you're going to be small and not be able to control guys, you need to be able to just go and mat return them over and over and over again for 15 minutes. And he just doesn't have the cardio for it. You look at the Antonio Arroyo fight. Yes, he won the third round, but that's because Arroyo was more gassed than he was.
Arroyo was cooked 5 minutes into that.
Exactly. And so I don't even put stock in that. And so I do think it's fairly likely Winn wins the first round of this fight, could land 3 or 4 takedowns and win the first round. I just don't trust Deron Winn to be able to continue to land takedowns at that clip over the course of the fight. But the other part of this is, even with that dynamic, I think Marquez is a pretty bad striker, if I'm being honest. Like he has a bit of power, but he just wings like wild shots. He's very, very easy to hit himself. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Winn knocked him out. I don't think he's certainly not on the level of like a Phil Hawes or anybody like, or a Gerald Mearshart as a striker. So am I betting there on Winn here? No, for the aforementioned reasons that he's tiny and gassy and probably a bit fragile as well, in addition to having no standing defense. But I mean, Julian Marquez also has no standing defense and is just bad at MMA. So I don't know. I guess I'm more interested in potentially playing Marquez live. But again, I don't know. It's kind of funny because I bet Winn against Darren Stewart back in the day. And if I still had the same opinion of Winn today that I did then, I'd probably bet him here because I do think Darren Stewart is better than Julian Marquez. But I don't. So I'm going to pass. What do you think, Legs?
So I'm not going to rehash a ton of points because I kind of think like largely as a whole the fight the same as you guys, but I was leaning more towards the under in this spot. But the only thing that's obviously holding me back there is the grappling from Winn and the fact that he really can't finish a sandwich. Well, I should say he can finish a sandwich, but he can't finish anybody in the UFC. So, yeah, I think Marquez largely knocks him out, quite frankly.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Moving on, this is an interesting fight. We got Jake Matthews. He's taking on Matt Semelsberger. I haven't bet Semelsberger, and I probably won't just because the AJ, what's the name of the kid he fought?
Fletcher.
AJ Fletcher. That fight is pretty horrifying. A pretty horrifying look at Semelsberger's grappling in that fight, and it just makes me think that if Matthews does chase the takedowns, he's going to just tear through him here. But by the same token, you have Jake Matthews, who came out against Andre Fiallo last fight and wanted to measure dicks rather than wrestle and fight safely. Jake Matthews, throughout his career, not exactly known for being the most intelligent fighter the world has ever seen. And I also, I wouldn't be surprised if Semelsberger is getting better at his defensive grappling. He is early enough in his career that he should be. I believe he's at a jiu-jitsu gym. And on the feet, I know Matthews is not minus 240. I know that unequivocally, but he's probably not minus 150 on the feet. It's likely a reasonably competitive fight. I just can't he's fought way better guys, and I can't unsee the fact that, Semelsberger got grounded so easily by Fletcher. So it's a pass for me. What do you think, Klags?
I just think it's a bit of a market overcorrection, quite frankly. I do think he has the grappling chops here to make it quite make it easy work. Sorry. Make it easy work. But like you had mentioned, Matthews is not the guy to take the easiest path to victory. So it's an interesting fight. I think the under's a decent look, but again, not super strong thoughts on that either.
What about you, Luke?
Yeah, this is kind of the old classic, market pendulum swing type of fight that we just see. I put it out on Twitter. It's like Jake Matthews being lined as a dog against Fiallo, right? It's like, what the fuck? I'm pretty sure any sort of sharp person in the community hit that line and cashed that ticket last time out. And it's but that just shows you how people perceive somebody. And then one thing happens and it's oh, now Jake Matthews is minus 270. 6 months later, now the guy's good. Everybody loves him. It's just so fucking dumb. I'm not even saying that the line's wrong or anything. I'm just saying sentiment wise, I think it's just comical every time we see this shit happen. But I thought you guys brought up a lot of good points. And that's kind of my thing with Matthews is, he primarily wrestled earlier on in his career, more so at 155. And that's ultimately what I wrote in my Patreon breakdowns too, John. It's he went out there against Fiallo. It's Fiallo has one win condition in this fight, and that's the fist to go burr. And Matthews goes, I'm gonna make my fist go burr bigger. And he attempts 0 takedowns in the fight. Granted, Matthews looked great. Matthews beat the shit out of him. Matthews knocked him out. I get it. But as a gambler, you also have to have another part on your shoulder that says, well, this guy did not take the path to least resistance at all, in that fight. And you got to have some concerns here as well against Semelsberger, because I kind of feel similarly, though, if he just wants to go to war with Semelsberger, it's Jake Matthews, I don't think he's minus 270 in that spot. Semelsberger's a big dude. Semelsberger hits hard. Semelsberger throws a ton of strikes. Even if you look at his fights with Chaos Williams and Morozo, he's getting beat by better strikers, sure, but I mean, he's both guys landed like upwards of 100 significant strikes on him in both fights. Like he just got outpaced, but he still landed a shitload of his own in there too. I believe he took a round in both fights as well, so he didn't get 30-27. But yeah, I just think it's another fight where I think the grappling upside, based on that Fletcher fight, to your point, John, I mean, it's just so heavily in the favor of Matthews. Like, Jake, do we want to go out here and wrestle tonight, or do we want to sit there and throw our 12-incher out there again, and see what happens? Because, like I said, if he does that, I still do favor Matthews on the feet. I think he's a better technical striker. But put it this way, I would not feel comfortable with a -270 Jake Matthews ticket if this fight stays upright for 15 minutes.
Agreed. Next fight, we got Cheyenne Vlismas taking on Corey McKenna. Lags, what do you think?
Not a lot of strong takes. I just kind of think Cheyenne keeps this fight standing. Butchers are up on the feet. I think Cheyenne's the much better striker here, but the line's quite a bit overblown, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Luke, what do you think?
I don't think there's really much to say with this one. You're probably going to get people on both sides of it. You either think that Cheyenne stays upright, and if she does, she's going to beat the fuck out of Corey McKenna. If not, and people think that McKenna's going to consistently land takedowns, well, McKenna, if that's the case, then she's going to look like a great play. So it kind of just comes out on what side you're on. I know a lot of people are going to always reference the Ruiz fight for Cheyenne, because that's just going to be kind of a red mark. Oh, Jesus Christ. that's the comment of the night. Oh, Lord Georgia. First he takes Joju, and then he takes, homegirl first team all sparring with reality Cheyenne base, that piece of shit. God damn you, Roman. Anyway.
And then he took Jack Soul.
Yeah. And my money.
And his calf.
But yeah, I'm more so the crew that I think Vlismas stays upright here and beats the shit out of her. Yeah, McKenna has the physicality of built like a bear. Like I think it was Piglord, I think, put something out on Twitter or said like McKenna has the physicality of a 12-year-old or whatever. And I was like, I just think that like sums her up so well. Like she's not physical. And that's the thing with Cheyenne. Like she is so much more physical. She's much more aggressive. She has that chip on her shoulder. I don't think the striking is really competitive here at all. Like you have a girl in McKenna like losing boxing exchanges to Kay Hansen. Like it's like what in fact, I mean, most people I think did score that fight for Kay Hansen as well, which needs to be noted. I mean, getting boxed up by Elise Reed, Elise Reed sucks. I don't know, needs to hear this. She's not good. You're losing striking exchanges there. Cheyenne's just like a 10 times better version of her than in my opinion. And even in the times that we've seen Cheyenne on the ground, on top or on bottom, outside of when she couldn't get out of the head and arm throw or whatever, like she's looked completely fine. She was fine in the guarded Demopoulos, back in the amateurs, if you remember that fight. So I don't know, man. I'm more of a Bays truther. I'm a McKenna hater personally, so maybe I'm biased, but I do think McKenna just stuffs takedowns, and this doesn't go very well for McKenna.
Yeah, I thought I would be betting McKenna, to be honest. The thing I don't even care about the Ruiz fight. And that's what makes this difficult for me to cap, because it's such a unique and awkward position. I don't see how anybody can put any stock in it. She's not going to end up in that position in this fight. So it's largely irrelevant. I do agree with Luke that Bays throughout her career has looked okay on bottom, but I do also think McKenna probably has the best top game of anybody she's fought in her career. I was actually somewhat impressed with McKenna's performance against Miranda Granger. Granted, it's Miranda Granger though, so do I put a ton of stock in that? Not really, but her physicality looked a bit better in that fight. She looked a bit more hungry in top position, I guess would be the best way to describe it, but I don't know how much to put in it. I guess for me, I come down on, I thought I'd bet McKenna, but after looking at it, I think the line's probably right, because the problem is, it's like not only does McKenna have to get takedowns, she has to hold her down. She's going to lose the stand-up here. She is out physical. It's possible she can't get her down, and if she can't get her down, Cheyenne's probably like -500, if we're being honest. So for me, it's just like, do you think, one, can McKenna get takedowns with relative ease? And two, can she hold her down? Those are two big ifs, though, especially since Cheyenne's grappling has mostly looked okay. I'm not particularly confident either way, but it's enough that I think all of the huge favorite upside is very likely on the McKenna side. So yeah, or not on the McKenna side, sorry, is very likely on the Cheyenne side. I'd have a hard time believing McKenna looks like minus 300 here, whereas if Cheyenne can get this fight to play out in her realm, I would expect her to look that at a minimum, if I'm being honest. So I'm happy to pass it. I understand folks at McKenna. It's just, like Luke said, the Elise Reed fight. Like, I don't know how one can watch that fight and be particularly confident about the result here. That was a tragedy, if we're being honest. I mean, she didn't even hold Elise Reed down in that fight, which is concerning. So, yeah,
and that's just another key component too, where I don't think it's as easy to say, oh, if McKenna lands takedowns, Baze is fucked here. Like, if Elise Reed, who is a white belt, can work up under you consistently, Cheyenne Baze will stand up in this fight.
I'm inclined to agree. So it's a pass for me. I don't feel strongly. I understand the shots at McKenna. I just personally, I think her upside is very likely small favorite, whereas I think Baze's upside is huge favorite. So it's a pass for me. Moving on, we have an interesting one here. We got Cody Brundage taking on Michal Olasadjuk. Olasadjuk's a huge favorite here. Luke, do you think the line's right? Do you think it's off? What are your thoughts?
This has to be a dogger pass situation. The thing with I think McCall whoops his ass on the feet. Personally, I don't think it's a really difficult fight to break down. But every time we've seen McCall on bottom, it's looked just completely tragic. And I would assume, based on the style dynamic here and Brundage's base, he's gonna come out here and wrestle. So it's another spot where it's like, if you're laying minus 270 on somebody, it's like, when their historic ground game has looked like complete garbage, it's like, that's a lot of assumption against someone who's going to try to go out there and implement that game plan. So I think it's kind of a binary fight in that regard. I honestly, I think violence is a better look. I think the under 1.5 isn't a bad stab, because if Brundage can't get him down, we've seen what's happened in multiple fights when that hasn't been the case. We know the type of pressure game that McCall is going to play. He is not going to sit here and fuck around on the outside, be low volume, and sit there and poke at guys. He is going to get after you. He is going to put hands on you. And if you do not have an answer to that, you're probably going to get finished. Whereas if Brundage does have an answer and McCall has not leveled up his bottom game, because how easily OSP was able to get into the position. I mean, Crute, he kind of had to mat return him a couple times, but in terms of like the actual general passing, immediate. Like, he looked completely lost from a defensive grappling standpoint. And Brundage isn't like some high-level jiu-jitsu guy or anything, but he's kind of that, like, top pressure passer, wrestler arm triangle type of guy. And I think that probably gives McCall a struggle. So like I said, I think it comes down to whether those improvements have been made. So it has to be Brundage on the money line if you're playing it, if not a violence route.
I'm probably going to take a small poke at Brundage here. Very small. I also like the under as well. I'm the under 1.5. But to me, the reason I'm going to go small and not moderate size is because I do, our boy Sean Orr was saying this to me earlier in the week, and I agree with him. I get very panicky vibes from Brundage when things don't go exactly to plan. We've seen it twice in the UFC from him now, and I think we all know if they're standing for any length of time, it's probably very, very bad news. And it's also the kind of fight where I could see if Brundage gets a takedown and he gets up, Brundage's optics didn't look good after the first exchange with Gore. In fairness, his cardio has looked pretty solid in the past, so I don't want to put too much into it. But, I mean, the reality is McCall's fought way better competition than Brundage has, so it's like you're always kind of playing a dangerous game there when you fade into that. But I don't really think McCall's made any grappling improvements whatsoever. I've heard people say he's gotten better. I don't know where they're taking that from. The guy got taken down by Dustin Jacoby fairly easily. He got controlled in the clinch in that fight fairly easily. The OSP fight, I know for whatever reason, people have convinced themselves that OSP is a good grappler because he learned one move, that he has fought low enough competition that he's been able to execute it against multiple times. the fact that McCall got caught in a bunt flu choke, I think speaks more about McCall than it does about OSP, especially because he got caught in it while he wasn't even attempting a guillotine, which is arguably a lot worse. You look at the Kroot fight. Kroot got him down, and then Kroot, when he was mat returning, he wasn't even really working. He was just kicking his legs out from under him, which to me just screams like the guy's got fairly poor balance. He doesn't have good hips. I kind of think Brundage, I should say this, I don't think McCall can be more than what his line is. Whereas, there are worlds where Brundage just goes out there and absolutely tears through him and dominates this fight. And like it's a very possible outcome. Brundage is a guy who used to fight at light heavyweight too. He's a strong guy. The guy back-mounted William Knight. Not that William Knight's a great grappler, but I would say McCall, who's a whole hell of a lot smaller and probably a commensurately bad grappler to William Knight. It kind of speaks a lot about where this fight is likely to go. Brundage has decent jiu-jitsu, stayed alive grappling with Maximov for about 11 minutes. I just think he has to be the side on the money line. But to your point, I do think under 1.5, because it is binary. If McCall is out there bombing on him, he probably gets him out of there. And if Brundage does get the dominant position fairly easily, I don't think McCall survives it. So I like the under as well, and I like a small shot at Brundage here. Lags, what do you think?
Yep, I'm on that under as well. Unit and a half, -110, under 1.5. And real quick, I want to talk about how good McCall looks at 185. Even though it was Sam Alvey in his last fight, I think one of the best lines of the year in terms of like violence. The under 2.5 in that fight was -130. So yeah, I mean, yeah. But yeah,
was it really that low?
Yeah. I was literally, it was funny. We were talking about a couple of fights earlier, and I was looking through my bet MMA because I know I wanted to talk about that fight because I knew I bet it, and I was like, yeah, I couldn't believe it was that low. But yeah, McCall and violence bets, love it.
Moving on though, we got a great fight. We got our boy Bobby Green taking on Drew Dober. Drew Dober -150 in the spot. I think I agree with the line, to be honest. I love Bobby. He's my guy, but let's be honest. Bobby always is a guy who's fighting. He's very rarely separating unless he's taking a very, very clear step down in competition. So you'd expect minutes in a fight like this to be fairly close. I mean, Dober's a tank. He's going to come forward. There's probably not a lot of, finishing equity on the Bobby side in this fight. Whereas, look, I don't expect Dober to knock him out, but Dober is a different kind of hitter, man. The guy's got some pop, and he's going to have him on the back foot this entire fight. I just broadly think you have to think Dober has a lot more of an opportunity to finish this fight than Green does. He's probably going to be landing the bigger shots in exchanges throughout this fight, so you'd have to imagine those optics favor him, and he's very likely to be on the front foot. Plus, I just think he's a bit more tested against good competition than Bob. Well, not more tested, but I think he's had better results to some degree than Bobby has. I think it's a close fight, to be clear. Like, I think if it goes the distance, it's likely a close fight. But I think when you have the guy who's going to throw a commensurate amount of volume, but throw harder, and he also has more finishing upside in the fight, he deserves to be a moderate favorite. So I think the line's fine. Lags, what do you think?
I don't think there's honestly much to add there. I think it's an easy fight to break down from that aspect, in my opinion. Like, I think Dober is going to land the harder shots, has pretty much 95% of the finishing ability. So just whether or not Bobby can weasel one, quite frankly. I think it's a close fight that goes to cards, like you said. Yeah.
Luke, what do you think?
So I don't have a bet or anything, but I'm more so on the side that I'd be much more inclined to bet Bobby here at +130, just because I think Dober is just so available. Like, sure, he on paper hits harder, but Bobby, I think, is a much slicker boxer than Drew Dober is personally. Drew Dober is a guy who's very hook reliant, and I guess there's a component. Like, I understand your point where I guess he's going to be the guy coming forward, but it's like, how many guys have just like bullied a guy like Bobby Green though? Like, it's not like an easy thing to do. So I kind of think the line's a little bit wide. I mean, I'm not playing Bobby Green at +130 because just fucking history, right? Like,
hey, but real quick though, Bobby Green by decision's +200.
Honestly, I think that's probably the best way to go, at least from a prop perspective. I'm honestly more inclined to look to the over here, though. I mean, both guys are incredibly tough to finish. I mean, Dober's been submitted a bunch of times, but Bobby doesn't wrestle, and even when he does, he doesn't attack submissions. Obviously, we've seen Dober hurt before, but Bobby's gonna Bobby shoulder roll, lots of volume, sometimes empty volume, sometimes fucking around. So it's going to be probably a blood pressure over 100%, but like minus 170, when you really contextualize the matchup and look at both these guys, like that's pretty short to me.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I don't disagree with you that Bobby's I think Bobby's probably the more skilled fighter in terms of technical ability, but yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I love Bobby, so we'd love to see him pull one out here. Moving on, we got a banger here. Alex Caceres taking on Julian Erosa. Man, this card really does slap, to be honest. What do you think, your lags?
That's another one where I kind of think the line is about right, but like playing Julian Erosa as like a minus 175 favorite, also like you need to get your medication, It's just like he's a guy that has close, sweaty fights with pretty much any level of competition. I mean, you go back and look at that Steven Peterson fight. I mean, that was a close-ass, sweaty fight. Steven Peterson's not that good. So where I come down to here, I just more so think that Erosa is the much cleaner, crisper striker. I don't mind shots in the under, but yeah, I think Erosa money line's about fine where it's at.
Luke, how about you?
I want zero to do with this fight.
Yeah.
You want to talk about like a market pendulum swing on both of these guys? Like that's been their entire career. Like I fired up my Bet MMA and looked at like the historic profitability of both guys as favorites and as dogs. They're actually both profitable as favorites and as dogs throughout their careers, despite their horrible records. Why is that? Because they're so fucking inconsistent that the market never knows how to get a read on them. But the ironic thing is that both guys actually have been more consistent in a recent run, right? You had Caceres, who was on a 5-fight win streak, prior, dropped the last fight, and then you've seen Erosa. But so I guess people might look at it and say, look, what are you talking about? Inconsistency. Both these guys have looked great recently. I'm talking about, look at the overall body, though, of these guys' careers. Like, I'm just saying both of these guys are incredibly wishy-washy, incredibly flaky fighters. And listen, I know that Erosa looked great against Dawodu, but I think he is better in this fight, honestly, probably in both realms, but I just can't unsee the fact that Julian Erosa has no defense. And then even in that win streak that he had, multiple fights, he would have lost if he didn't catch people late. So that really needs to be contextualized as well. And Caceres is just kind of a noodly, weaselly, tricky guy to fight at the end of the day too. So like, it's to me, it's just like, it's so trapped. Like the books want you to bet Julian, like they want you to do it. And I'm just, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. He should win. I do think he is the better fighter, but to me, this has a lot of sentiment of letdown spot here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a messy fight for sure. I was considering betting Erosa till I rewatched the Peterson fight this morning, and you watch that fight and the takeaway is, how did this happen? He's looked like so good how did that fight happen and then him just carve through Dawodu in the way he did? It makes almost no sense whatsoever. But I do think he's better than Alex at most facets of MMA. Yeah.
And what's funny thing about that too, he closes a 3-1 favorite in that fight,
yeah,
the Peterson fight. Yeah.
But like that's I don't even think that line was crazy before pre-fight, to be honest. I didn't bet the fight. I thought the line was fine. I thought skill-wise that's about where it should be, and then it turned into just an all-out war. And so like that fight makes it just basically impossible for me to trust Erosa. But I do think he's the better fighter. He's more dangerous for sure. He's got way more power, and I think he is more likely to find a sub. But I am interested in the under here. It's plus money. Both guys, Caceres, he's done a good job of not getting cracked throughout his career, but he is someone who is available to get cracked if you close the distance on him. And Julian is someone who will pressure and force a pace. And obviously, we all know Julian is there to get cracked by everybody. So I do expect a very high volume fight. It's in the Apex, so these guys should slug it out pretty heavily here. Yeah, I mean, I kind of think the under should be around evens, maybe even slight minus money here. That's a crazy take because Caceres historically doesn't really hurt guys, but Julian's also been hurt by guys who don't historically hurt guys a lot, and Caceres is a fairly sharp fighter. So yeah, I kind of like the under here, to be honest. I'm probably going to bet it. Money line is just a pass for me, though. It's hard for me to feel passionately about it. Moving on, we have kind of a garbage fight. We got Amir Albazi taking on Alessandro Costa. Albazi's chalked in the gills here. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I don't really have much to say. There actually is a decent amount of footage out there on the Costa guy. I think his hands are decent. You know, he's shown some power. He's shown some offensive grappling upside, but it's in that bullshit Lux promotion where it's like, yeah, he's fighting guys with winning records, but it's like, isn't that the same promotion that didn't Gennaro Valdez come out of there too or whatever? Like, it's just kind of like, you know, whatever to me. And a big part of the fight for me is in the tape, at least I watched, I haven't seen this guy really have to defensively wrestle or defensively grapple at all. And so I don't really know how that looks much. So I'm good to sit this one out. Albazi obviously kind of on his trajectory to go up, but still no real interest with some unknowns on Costa at like minus 475. So pass for me.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. It's hard to draw a real. I mean, I shouldn't say it's hard to draw a beat on the fight. I feel pretty confident Albazi's the better fighter. Costa went to a split with that guy Lita Martinetti on Contender Series, and then went back to Lux where they gave him a 6-5 bum to knock out in 13 seconds, and apparently that was enough to bring him into the UFC. So I don't know. Albazi should take care of business. I don't have, even like GTD, which would be mildly tempting if I had any real data on Costa rest fighting a decent grappler, but we don't. Albazi's a decent flyweight. I don't really rate Costa that much. He should be fine, but I have no strong feeling on it. Lags, what do you think?
I'll give the good old C. Hansen here a pass.
Moving on, though. Awesome fight. Arman Tsarukyan, Damir Ismagulov. I bet Damir, and I might even add to it. I have a unit on him at the moment. I've always been an Arman guy, to be honest, but I don't know. I think the logical take that I've seen mostly for the Arman side is, Arman's just going to overwhelm him with physicality. And I do think Arman is the more physical fighter. But if you go through Arman's career, he's never exactly been a guy who's top timing guys. He did it to Joel Alvarez, but, I think we all might have bet him against Joel Alvarez. And we knew, one of the reasons he was going to solidify top time there is because Joel Alvarez doesn't try to get off his back. He just cedes position attempting submissions. Every other guy, OAM able to work up against him fairly consistently. Got clinch controlled for a bit, but able to work up against him. Fravolo was able to work up against him consistently. He's just not – he's an excellent wrestler. He has excellent takedowns, and he's an elite defensive grappler. But I don't think he's the kind of suffocating grappler like a Khabib or an Islam or someone like that, despite the pedigree that he comes from. With that said, I think he can get takedowns here, but I do think Ismagulov's a fairly well-schooled defensive grappler. He's got good hips. He hasn't ever fought somebody like Arman, but again, he's a very educated fighter. I'd be surprised if he just gets top timed here. And on the feet, I think there's a fairly wide gap. The physicality edge is real for Arman. He's definitely stronger. He's definitely more explosive. But in my opinion, Damir is a much, 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 much better technical striker. You go back and watch the Gamrot fight, and I thought Arman won the fight, but his stand-up was basically spam body kicks. His boxing didn't look impressive, and I don't really rate Gamrot striking that much. And so the fact that he struggled as much as he did in the boxing makes me think it's very, very unlikely he has success in the pocket with Damir here. I actually think he's going to get walked onto a whole bunch of stuff, which means he probably has to pursue the grappling hard. I still don't fully trust Arman's gas tank if he has to go that route, especially against a guy like Damir who's going to provide resistance. So honestly, given the striking dynamic and the fact that I don't think Damir is likely to be controlled, I actually think it should be like evens, maybe even slightly lean Demir here. So I have a small bet on him. What do you think, lads?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit more on the other side, and I kind of think Arman can get the takedowns and the physicality and the grappling, the pace is just the huge issue here for Demir. But yeah, I can't really disagree with you on the feet. I think Demir is obviously the cleaner, crisper striker here. For me, though, I just more like the goes the distance. Minus 200, I think that's a solid price for GTD here. So I got 2 units on that.
Agreed. Luke, what do you think?
I will take my victory lap on a guy in Ismagulov. I said like 3 years ago that this guy was going to be in the top 15 of the UFC. It's probably one of my most shining predictions I've ever had. So I'm going to take my fucking victory lap on that. So this guy's the fucking goods. This guy is the fucking goods. Hopefully my girl Yasmin Yargui can get there and you know, not like Maria Agapova and start doing coke and worshiping Satan or some shit like that. But, you know, we'll pray for her. We'll pray for her, right? You know, hopefully we can go 2 for 2. But I honestly, dude, I think this is legitimately one of the highest level fights that's not for a title of this entire year. Like, dude, this is such a sick fight. It's not even funny. I think there's significant merit both ways, but it's another fight that has a ton of question marks based on like benchmark because both guys have been so good. Both guys have shown very little chinks in their armor. You can definitely pick and poke at certain different things, but like extended wise, multiple opponent wise, it's very difficult to do. I think I'm kind of with Lags on the side where I think Tsarukyan might be more physical and be able to land more takedowns, but I do think Demir is actually the slicker boxer. And that's kind of my thing where it's like difficult to make a pick because it's like, even if Tsarukyan does get him down, can he hold him down? Can he control him? Which, I mean, pretty much nobody ever has before. So you're kind of in no man's land in that regard. Like I said, I've just been such a big fan of both guys striking, but I've been even a bigger fan of Demir because I think he's just a processed guy. He doesn't take a lot of risks, but he keeps, I wouldn't want to say a high work rate, but a good work rate at the same time to be more active, outpaces guys. I know he got like briefly clipped against Kutateladze, got briefly clipped by Alves, but even the Alves fight, he was coming off like a massive layoff there and recovered like absolutely immediately, stood right back up, and then got right back in on what he was going to do. I think it's a close fight. I think it's a close fight at the end of the day. So from a betting perspective, I mean, there's really only one way you can go, at least from a money line, and it has to be Demir. I do think probably the best bet for the fight is just the over 2.5 and to pony up for that. I mean, both guys are just crazy durable. Both very defensively sound by and large, both very tough, both have very good cardio, good defensive grappling, high level chess match, only 3 rounds. Like, you know, I think the over 2.5 is a good play, but I'm probably actually going to take a little small pop to Demir decision, which is what, probably like minus 250, or I'm sorry, plus 250 or something like that.
Yeah, it's plus 250.
Yeah, I'm probably going to take like a half unit into that because I do think this is going to be a competitive fight, but I don't think he gets Arman out of there. So plus 250 on something where he's going to give him a scrap. I think it's decent.
Yeah, fair. Moving on to the main event. It's an interesting fight. We got Jared Cannonier and Sean Strickland. Lags, what do you think?
One I'm having a little bit of a tough time on, I guess I should say, because I do think I do think the volume of Sean Strickland, I think he has much better cardio, quite frankly, than Cannonier. While I do think that is in play, like it's also in play where Sean like outlands him for about like half the round and like the last like minute and a half. Cannonier's landing the bigger, just harder strikes and sways the round in his favor that way. So like, I don't know. I don't have a lot of strong reads here, as well as the Cannonier calf kicks as well could slow down Sean. I think ultimately lining at a pick'em's probably fine. I don't have too strong reads, quite frankly.
Luke, how about you?
Not to backtrack really quick to the last fight. I know our boy Basel said Demir, great fighter, but Graham won the fight. In my opinion, I think Demir won the fight. I thought he did more damage. You know, the late takedown at the end, you can say what you want. Whatever. In my opinion, he landed more damage in the fight. I know I'm in the minority on that because a lot of people either had Graham tickets. I obviously had an Ismagulov ticket, so I guess you can call me biased. But I thought lining Ismagulov, if you gave me that fight hindsight, Ismagulov 60% was probably about correct based on how it played out. I thought he did better work in that fight, but I know I'm in the minority on that. But yeah, onto this one. I don't have a super strong opinion either. It's kind of, I guess you get similar dynamics to him when he fought Pereira for a lot of reasons. It's like, is Sean going to go out there and wrestle? Even though if he does, I don't know how much extended success he has against a guy like Cannonier, who I think's takedown defense and get-up game has gotten a ton better in recent years. And this is the thing that I think is really interesting about the fight. Like, if you look at the guys that have given Cannonier the biggest issues historically, it's like outside guys, counter guys, blitz guys. It's not really Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland's kind of like a lip of the pocket, stand in front of you boxer. Like, he's got good counters within the pocket, but he's not a guy who's going to like skirt the outside play. Like, no, he's going to play, in that mid-range lip of the pocket type of game. So it's like, I just think it's kind of unique in that sense, where I think Jared is going to have ample opportunities to kill him because Sean's going to give that to him. At the same time, I think Sean is still a slicker boxer. I like Sean on minutes in the fight. It's just, over 25 minutes, if he's going to give him those opportunities, not wrestle at all. I think Jared's live to bonk him again. I know that sounds like a marked take based on the Pereira fight, but like I said, just based on the dynamic between the two and how they both fight. I mean, even look at Cannonier still took a round, off of Whitaker, right? He didn't get mollywopped in the fight by any means. But I mean, Sean Strickland is, a five-round fighter, through and through. So I think you would have to favor Sean in this fight should it extend, but Cannonier is going to have his moments to kill him in this fight, which is why I really have no betting interest here.
Look, John, real quick to add to your point there, the decision only prop for Sean is 165, minus 165. So
I think that's the better way to play the fight, personally.
I might bet Jared, to be honest. I understand the idea of minutes versus moments here, but I also think Strickland historic volume is perhaps being given a bit too much credit in the context of this fight. You look back at the Izzy fight, Izzy outlanded Jared by, I think, 27 strikes. And then the Whitaker fight where he got outlanded by 16 strikes. But, he broke his arm in the Whitaker fight. And certainly, look, Izzy clearly won the fight, but it's not like it was a non-compete from the Cannonier side. The Whitaker fight, it was a fairly competitive fight. He hurt Whitaker at one point in that fight. It was 29-28. Those are the two best fighters in this division by a lot, in my opinion, in spite of who is champion. I still hold that opinion. But, irrespective of that, so we've seen Jared actually kind of hang on minutes of the elite. Now, I do favor, to be clear, I think Strickland will land more strikes here. But kind of going back to like Dober and Bobby Green, we know Jared's the much bigger hitter in this fight. Luke, you've been talking about it for years with Strickland, the way he can kind of get over his skis going forward and be very available to get hit and get hurt. That's going to be it here. And like Cannonier, this is not Uriah Hall who's going to wilt if you pressure him. Like, if you go forward on him, he's going to let his hands go. And so even though I think Strickland lands more volume in this fight, I think the bigger strikes are certainly going to come from Jared here. I think he has way more opportunity to have moments just in general with his hands to win rounds. I am not convinced that Sean's volume, while I think he'll land more, will be as extreme as it normally is, just because power has a tendency to suppress volume historically. And then, on top of that, you talk about, Strickland's the guy who stands straight up in the air and is very heavy on the lead leg. He hasn't really fought like a top-level leg kicker the way Cannonier is. And Cannonier throws like nuclear leg kicks. Would it be? I don't think it would be surprising to see his kicks really have an outsized impact on Strickland in this fight. And to your point, Luke, maybe Strickland should come out and wrestle him. But personally, I mean, David Branch took Cannonier down 3 times and couldn't control him. Jack took him down and couldn't control him. He's got a very good get-up game. I don't really, yeah.
I did say, though, I think that's something you can mix in, but I said that he was going to struggle to control.
Yeah. But I just don't, yeah. So I don't really think it's all that live. And, on the other side, what Jared has shown is that he's very, very durable, especially at middleweight. And so with that being the dynamic, I think you have to give him a fairly large edge in finishing equity in this fight. And given that I think he potentially has the power to offset some of the minute winning upside of Strickland, I don't really think you can give Sean a commensurately large edge to win a decision, especially when you factor in the leg kick aspect as well. So, I mean, it's not the most passionate take ever, but I personally think Jared should be a slight fave here, like minus 125 to minus 150. Yeah.
I was going to add too, if you're on the Cannonier side, I was just looking, they have McKenna plus 275.
It's not terrible. Might split it. I have to split stuff these days.
I know you're gonna have some on the money line. I was just saying as well.
Yeah, no, that's not.
Yeah.
That's not bad, and that's like, but think about that. So their pricing is
And the last thing I'll say, I am actually picking Cannonier to knock him the fuck out. That's just what I want to say.
And so it's like I honestly think a little too much is being put into the Strickland volume here, and not enough into what Cannonier can do to offset it. It's kind of funny because Jared's like one of those very high floor but not super high ceiling kind of guys. Like people point at the Gastelum fight and be like, look at that. But then you turn around and you look at him fighting reasonably close with Adesanya and Whitaker. And it's like, well, I mean, look at that. I think he provides a lot of interesting stylistic challenges here for Strickland, especially, with the power and athleticism. So, I mean, I lean to the Jared side here. I'm probably going to bet him. Not big, like very, very small bet. But, yeah, I mean, I like Jared. So, I mean, that'll wrap it up for the night, guys. That'll wrap it up for the year, actually. So, if you follow us, guys, drop a like and subscribe, please. It would help us out. As usual, you can find us on Twitter. You can find me and John at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags, and Luke at SWR_betting. Happy Christmas, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Atheist Day. Whatever floats your boat. Enjoy the holidays. Enjoy your families. Enjoy betting on this last card. Good luck, unless you're on the other side, in which case I hope you lose. But we'll see you guys back here, first card of the year next year. I think around January 12th, I want to say, will be our first podcast back. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna find that out for you.
I think the first card is January 15th, if I'm not mistaken.
The first one I see up here is January 21st, but I don't think that's correct. That's the 283.
No.
That's 283 now.
Okay, so January 11th, we'll be back here. 7 p.m. Eastern, same time as always. Good luck, everybody. Happy holidays. Peace out.